Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jacavius Pickett. I serve as the lead pastor of Praise Temple of Biloxi here in Biloxi, Mississippi. Today I'm representing the Legacy Business League. It's the mission of the Legacy Business League to empower the minority professionals and businesses by providing a network that will assist them in the building and expansion of its members through the shared resources, professional development, and patronage along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Our mission of the Legacy Business League is fueled by the sacrifices made by previous generations, and our goal is to create a legacy for those generations to come. I am excited this morning to be here with Legacy Talk, with the Legacy Talk series, The Healing of the Black and Blue. This is part two of this series, and today we are excited to welcome none other than Chief the Chief of Police of the City of Biloxi, Chief John Miller. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. Good morning.
Chief, can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your policing career? How long have you been policing? How long you've been Chief of Police, and things of that nature?
I certainly can. I don't want to bore anybody to death, but I'll try to move through it briefly. I was looking for a job in 1989. I had worked offshore for quite a few years and had come back to home and had built some houses for a little while, worked construction. And so I was looking for a job with some kind of future. And I saw that several police departments were hiring. And so I started putting my applications in, like I said, in 1989. In 1990, the Biloxi Police Department hired me. And it was December the 17th, 1990 was my first day of work. Came to work then, spent about 5 years working patrol, and from patrol I moved to narcotics, which is somewhere that I had not asked to go. I had asked to go to criminal investigations. I thought that I would enjoy working burglary and murder, but my boss at the time decided that I needed to go to narcotics.
Okay.
So I spent quite a few years in narcotics, much longer than I should have, and then moved from narcotics into criminal investigations. And I did a rotation back and forth a couple of different times, from narcotics back to criminal investigations, back to narcotics. And then in December of 2009, I was offered the position of director. And it was something I had not planned on doing, but the previous director had recommended that I put my application in because it wasn't a job that I really wanted to do at the time. But I put my application in and I was selected, and that's been almost 10 years now.
Right. So, Chief, I met you. I think you were leading that criminal investigations unit. That was several years ago, back in 2004, 2005, I believe. So I've been knowing you for a long time.
Long time.
So your official title is director, but we call you Chief. Can you explain that director title?
Yeah. I'm the chief of police, but years ago. And I don't know which mayor it was, decided that all the department heads should hold the title of director. And so that's just kind of stuck over the years. So half the time I sign director and half the time I sign chief. So it's
okay.
interchangeable.
Gotcha. I didn't know if that had something to do with the fire department and because you guys are both housed in public safety. So
Yeah.
I wanted to
No,
that
something that some quirk that somebody had at one time or another, and it's just stuck all these years.
So, Chief, and our viewing audience, this series, The Healing of the Black and Blue. 2 weeks ago, we had Chief Leonard Papania, the Gulfport, the Chief of Police at Gulfport Police Department. He was with us, and today you're with us. What the Legacy Business League is attempting to do and has tried to do, and we hope we're successful with this two-part series, is to create a dialogue between our police departments and our community. With all that's going on in our nation right now, with the death of George Floyd, with the call to defund the police departments, and so many other things around the country that we see. Most recently, the shooting in Atlanta. We just want to create that positive dialogue between our community and our police departments. And what better way to do it than to get those heads that leads those departments to sit down with us and talk to our community on a public forum and field a few questions. So today I want to ask you a few questions. I had a conversation with you earlier in the year. You have an open door policy. You allowed me to come sit down with you. And I asked you a question. I said, how are you doing, Chief? how are you doing as a leader? And you said, man, it's rough. And when you said that, I began to ask you questions, in regards to what's wrong. And he said, policing now is harder than it's ever been. It's now as harder than it's ever been. And you began to talk about some change that you had been making within your own department. And now with the call to reform, the reforming the police department and the defunding of the police department, what's your thoughts on that? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let me start with reform. A lot of people seem to view the police department as one huge department in the United States, and that is far from the truth. Departments are operated differently, different philosophies all throughout the United States. So there's a big difference. All police, and we don't all know each other. Some people seem to think that we all know each other. We do not. Some of the bigger issues that I have dealt with over the years, first was the hiring of minorities. Very difficult to hire minorities for quite a while. And when I say minorities, I mean across the board. Orientals, black, female, very, very difficult. When I first started in this business, that was much more difficult than it is now. But we just were unable to do that. Your department should reflect the diversity of your community. I think that's a given. I think that's common sense, and I don't think anybody should view that differently than that. But it was very, very difficult. So we worked very hard to try to get those recruitments in order. And we had great success with hiring females. And I thought that was probably something that was nationwide. But I sit on a national board, and when I asked the other members of that board, I said, have you seen, this increase? And females wanted to be the police, and all of them told me no, which was a surprise to me because we had seen that, and we still see it. We still have a lot of females that apply, for the police department. I'm very proud of that. As far as Orientals, very, very, very difficult to hire Orientals, and I think it's probably Orientals are, they're kind of taught from birth that you need to make money, or at least it appears that way to me. And I'm just being honest.
Yes, sir.
So very difficult to hire them because they want to get into other businesses other than law enforcement. And then hiring black males and females was very difficult for a while, but that seems to have loosened up a little bit. But what we see is we don't see young black people getting into this business. If we're hiring black people, it's usually a male, and it's from another department. He's coming here because we pay a little more and our insurance is a little better, and we like to think that we have a good reputation, and I think that we do. So the majority of the black community that we hire are already policemen when they come to us. Again, very difficult to bring young black people into this business.
So what would you say the difficulty is? I mean, especially from the African American perspective, you were talking about the Asian community, that you think that they were raised to make that money off the bat, so to own businesses and things of that nature. What would you say from the African American standpoint is the hiring difficulty there?
And some of it may be the same. Some of them, and you're not going to get rich being a cop.
Correct.
That may be some of it. And then I think there's a culture there, that, hey, I want to be the police,
Yeah.
And, I've talked to many of the black ministers in town because we needed help in trying to recruit. And so I had talked to them, and a couple of them have told me the same thing, that they don't think that young black people want to get into this business. That needs to change. This is an admirable, honorable business if you do things the way you're supposed to do them. So I wish I had a better answer for you as far as recruitment, but I don't.
So when you say this is an admirable and an honorable business if you do things the right way, the way you're supposed to do them, let's look at some of the initiatives that are going forward now, as in regards to reform. Man, you had a conversation just a minute ago in regards to some of the policies that many police departments still have. However, you here in Biloxi, you guys don't have these type of policies. Like we looked at the George Floyd incident with the knee to the neck, and I've seen several other videos, and of course you have too, with the different kind of chokeholds. Now, from what you said, you guys, that's a policy that's been going out the window a long time ago.
We did away with that policy. It was either '09 or '10, one or
Okay.
the other.
So why do you think many other departments hold on to these kind of policies?
Man, I think a lot of them policies are put in place, and it's just day-to-day business, and nobody ever goes back and says, hey, we need to change these policies, much like a lot of the laws that are on the books these days. A lot of things should have been repealed years ago or removed altogether, and they haven't been. And then there's if you look at a lot of the bigger cities, it's more difficult to change things because they're unionized, and the unions play a big role in what happens in the police departments. Here, and I view this as a positive on our end. We don't have that control. It's up to us to change things if we think they need to be changed. And I had told you earlier about, I had these policies that I had received the other day asking me to put these policies in place. And there's 8 of those policies that have caught a lot of national attention. And when I looked at them, all 8 of those policies we have in place and have had them in place for many years. So I don't know why other agencies, especially away from South Mississippi, haven't embraced those things already also.
And these are policies that are trying to be spread nationwide.
Right.
But right here in South Mississippi, we already have these policies.
Man, we are ahead of, I have the policies if you'd like me to go over them right quick.
Can you read a couple of them off
can.
of it, please?
These
are some policies, ladies and gentlemen, that he received from someone at Harvard University of initiative on reform that they were trying to get spread nationwide. And he received this email, and he's just going to read a couple of these policies. Now, let me give you a prerequisite. These policies that you're hearing are policies that have already been established here in South Mississippi.
That's right. Well, in Biloxi, and
Biloxi,
I
in
feel
Biloxi.
I feel confident that the majority of the agencies along the coast have these same policies. So this is an initiative. It's 8 can't wait use of force policies, and the first one, it says that police, and they had asked could you please implement these, and the first one is the banning of chokeholds and strangleholds. Like I said, it's been almost 10 years that we've had that. We've done away with that.
So for the last 10 years, the banning of chokehold and strangleholds are not part of the use of force.
That is not
in
used.
Biloxi.
That's right.
So with that being said, if it's not a part of the policy and an officer used that, they stand the chance for disciplinary action and potentially subject to termination.
That's true. That disciplinary action, whatever that disciplinary action be, and that would certainly depend on whatever the action was and the severity of it. But the policy is that we have a policy that you will not use those.
You will not use those.
You will not use those. Excuse me. Require de-escalation using communication and distance.
I like to call it verbal judo.
We use verbal. We actually taught verbal judo, which we're getting away from now because there's some better things out there. So we're moving away from those things.
So communication.
Communication, and diverting the person especially if they're upset, diverting their anger or their negative attitude to something, trying to divert it to something positive. Now, does it always work? No. Will there always have to be some force used? Absolutely. You've been a policeman, and there's always going to be a time when you've got to go hands-on. Yes, but what you want to do is you want those times to be as few as possible. Right. And then next, require verbal warnings before shooting at a civilian. Absolutely. And that's taught in the academies here. That's taught by every agency around here. You don't just shoot somebody without, you're going to warn them, stop what you're doing if it's deadly force is indeed, necessary. A requirement to exhaust all other reasonable means before resorting to deadly violence. Absolutely. Common sense should tell you that anyway. Even if you didn't have a policy, you should know that you need to do everything you can do before you take a life. Everything possible. Require intervention by officers to stop excessive use of force. Certainly, if there's an officer that is using a force that is unacceptable, excuse me, then other officers that are there should step in. And in Biloxi, you're responsible to stop those things from happening.
Correct. So I think you just read 4 or 5. So we talked about it's two things we talked about that I want to bring out. If any one of those policies are broken, they're subject to disciplinary action. And the second one was being there. If you're an officer and you see another officer doing something wrong, it's your duty to step in. So let's talk about the disciplinary action first. Then we'll go to the duty to step in. So if there's a disciplinary action that's being done internally, is there some sort of community liaisons or community oversight committee that teams up with the police department to help make sure that those internal investigations are done fair and also provides transparency to the community?
Not per se a board, and that has been discussed many times over the years. Not per se a board, but usually it starts with a complaint. Excuse me, with a complaint being filed, or me finding, or one of my staff finding out about something that took place, even if there's not a complaint filed, and us looking into it to see what is what. And usually we start with the victim and get the victim's opinion, or what they believe happened, or did they believe what had happened was inappropriate, and then we move on from there. It depends on the level of the issue at hand as to what the disciplinary action will be, or it depends on if an officer has had prior disciplinary action. So we keep an eye on all that. If they've had several disciplinary actions, certainly it's different than if it's their first time, depending on the issue itself. If you're a cop, and you know this, if you're a cop out doing your job, you're going to get complaints.
Correct.
That's going to happen. I don't, maybe they're valid, maybe they're not. And being human beings, they don't always make the perfect decision when they need to. So sometimes it takes a refocusing. Hey, you did this. We're going to put it behind us, and this is what you need to do in the future.
So being in the area of public trust, well, how can citizens, besides just the common trust, how can citizens be assured that the proper steps or the proper procedures are being taken in the disciplinary actions of officers who may have violated policies or may have it was a valid complaint? How can they be rest assured that is going to take place besides being an area of public trust?
Right. Well, the way we do it is once there's been a resolution, we always contact the victim and tell them, this is what we did. Whether it's something they want to hear or not hear, you just got to be honest with folks and tell them. We found that this officer was acted inappropriately, which I don't have a problem with that. We found they acted inappropriately, and these are the steps that we've taken. I can only think of a couple of times once we told them, that yes, what you told us was accurate, and the officer did it, and we've taken care of it. I can only think of a couple of times when people were not satisfied with the outcome, that we're going to suspend this officer. Well, I want him fired. Well, we don't think it's a firing offense. If it was a firing offense, we'd fire him, but we don't believe it is. I assure you that on South Mississippi, a police chief or even a sheriff don't want people working for them that's going to cause them a lot of problems in the future. And we try to correct those issues early on if there are issues. It's just going to come back to get you. And anybody that thinks that I'll give them another chance, I'll give them another chance, I'll give them another chance. We all know as leaders that is going to come back to get you. This person, maybe they're not a bad person. Maybe they just don't need to be a law enforcement officer.
Correct.
Yes.
And I want to come to that next, but let me go into this next question.
Sure.
So with oversight within the police department, just say we see in the case of George Floyd, we see one of the officers being charged with murder, and the other three officers being charged with accessory. How can other officers police other officers effectively? What can we do? I understand the thin blue line. I understand that there's a brotherhood. I understand the protection of the shield, and I understand that. But it is the job of the police to protect and serve. How can other police officers, police others, and the community be assured that, look here, that we got to take care of it. That we have all officers making sure that the community is being taken care of in light of maybe some rogue officers that's out there?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you like this. Uh, I'm sure there are some other mechanisms that could be put in place to make people feel better about, or feel more positive about the outcome of situations. But the reality of it is, either you've got decent people working for you that you can trust, and you trust the chief of police in your community, or you don't. It's that simple. And the way you gain that trust, the way I've gained that trust, I think, over the years, is by treating people fairly and just calling it like it is. This is the way it is. When I talked to one of the graduating classes here last year at the academy, at the beginning of this year, at the academy, and what I told them in that speech, and it's very, very personal to me, you don't owe a dirty cop anything. You don't owe him nothing. There is no brotherhood for a dirty cop. You don't owe him nothing. You owe your respect and your dignity to the other officers that you serve with that are good cops, and to your community. And you just have to be honest people. There's not a committee or a board out there that can change anything if you don't have honesty and honest people working for you.
So, so we talked about you mentioned the hiring process in the new academy. How does that background check go? For fielding new officers, because you've heard the thing that the Ku Klux Klan has infiltrated police departments. You've heard all of this stuff. But we are living in a season where mental illness is on an all-time high, and it's not just mental illness within the community, but this is mental illness that happens within our communities that sometimes come within our businesses, including the police department. So we tend to hire people who may have some kind of vendetta, may have some kind of experience something in their past. How does the background check go, and also the hiring process, as making sure that you all weed out those things that could potentially become issues within your department?
Well, I think we've done a great job in Biloxi at doing that. The difficulty is always in the person themselves. You're going to have an awful lot of people out there who have grudges or vendettas, who have no criminal history. Nothing shows up. You can ask them the right questions, and they're going to give you the answer that they think that you want to hear. Probably one of the bigger ways to ferret some of that out is through the psychological. Making sure that when that psychological comes back, and that psychological is usually pretty accurate, when the psychological comes back, that it tells you that this person is not someone who's going to be biased, that this is a true person that is honest and decent. And then we do an interview ourselves with everyone, a personal interview before we hire them. And they're usually within a board of about 4 people, and we have a series of questions that we ask, and those questions we've designed not so much, I don't really care so much about how you answer or what the answer is. I care more about how you answer. And so we've structured those questions so that we hope that we can see some things that come to light for us before we hire somebody, some things that may tell us that that answer should not have been that way. And this is not an example of a question, but I will give you, people say particular things, and those particular things will tell you a lot about that person if you'll just listen. If you were in an interview and the interviewer were to ask you, what's more important to you, your family or your job? Now, for you and I, that's a very simple question. Certainly our family
Correct.
is much more important than our job.
Yes.
But a job is something that you have to have, and you raise your family that way. But if someone were to answer, and this is not a question we use, but if someone were to tell you that, well, my job is more important than my family, that tells you what you need to know. You're not going to hire that person. So those questions do exist. They are there. And I prefer not to spread those questions out because we ask those people directly that question, But from the start, there's a background check that's done on you, an extensive background check. And we contact friends, we contact relatives, we contact places of employment in the past. Most of the time we get responses from them. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes those responses are positive, sometimes they're negative, and that's what we're hoping for. We want to see the truth. Then from there, uh, you start off with a physical agility test and a regular written test. Then the interview. Then you're going to do a psychological in there, and that psychological is going to tell us an awful lot. By a professional, it's going to tell us an awful lot about that person's character, right? Then we do the interview, and then last but not least, we're going to bring you back in, and we're going to give you a polygraph. And a polygraph that we use is not the old-fashioned polygraph. It's a certified voice stress analysis test. And what that tells us is whether you show stress on questions that we ask you. It's not telling us whether you're lying or not, but stress is a huge indication that you're telling something that's not true. And then we'll give you an opportunity to come back and explain to us why hey, you failed this. There was a lot of stress on this question. Why? Why was there stress on that question? And we get to some people don't make it past that, but then we're able to ferret out a lot of people that I think that we would not want to hire. We're able to eliminate them that way.
So during that process, what are the percentage of people you turn around and say you're not a good fit for this department? Would you know that?
Well, let me say this. We will usually there's usually during the agility test, we'll usually start off with somewhere between 40 and 50. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little lower. Then the written test, we get to the written test, we've usually eliminated about probably sometimes close to half, Then by the time you get through with the background, you've eliminated another quarter usually. And this is not something we're wanting to do. These are just the facts speaking for themselves. And then by the time you get to the interview, there's going to be several that are going to be eliminated out of the interview. And then by the time you take that truth verification test, we usually out of 40 or 50, we'll usually come out with 6 or 8.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So that's a high percentage.
Absolutely, it's a high percentage.
Wow.
And then we'll even go back sometimes and look at officers that we thought or potential officers that why didn't this person do good, and we'll go back and look and make sure that we haven't made a mistake, because I don't want to cost somebody a career in law enforcement when they're really fit to be a law enforcement officer, and for whatever reason something popped up there that was a no-no. Let's look at that and see if that's something that we can work with or not. So it's extensive.
Right. So with the hiring process, is there a periodic fitness performance exam or something that you guys do? Just say another psychological evaluation. Because I know in the federal system, like yearly, we have to take psychological evaluations.
So we do not force anyone to take a psychological evaluation unless there's an issue. We do, however, go in and evaluate their work ethic and and how well they performed over the year. We do that twice a year. You get the first one that tells you, hey, we don't think that you're performing up to par on these issues, and we give that to you, right? Unless it's something that we need to address immediately. We need you to come up to par on these things. Then at the end of the year, you're going to get your second evaluation. And if those things haven't come up to par, then you're going to get a bad evaluation. And nobody wants a bad evaluation. That could affect a lot of things. It certainly is going to affect promotion and, any moving throughout the department.
So in our society, there's a lot of stressors that are taking place on the job and off the job. And off the job, you got family stresses. I mean, we have economic woes right now. And as you know, a lot of police officers don't get paid, the highest salary. You have family issues. You also have stresses on the job where they're experiencing violence and things of that sort. What sort of counseling resources are available to your police officers that will help reduce the mental strain and those stresses that they go through?
Right. Well, certainly, we've made it very clear that you're always open to talk up your chain of command if there's an issue. Talk up your chain of command, or you can come straight to me. You can come straight, walk right into the director's office, chief's office, and talk to me if you think there's a problem. And over the years, I've had quite a few, and I respect that. When someone has, the gumption to come in and say, something's not right with me. And I've had that several times. When that takes place, immediately we set them up for a fitness for duty, a psychological evaluation, or, depending on the circumstances and the situation, we will provide them with counseling. Would you like to see a professional counselor? We have someone on staff. If someone decides they want to talk to a counselor, all they have to do is make the call. Their name doesn't show up, it doesn't come up anywhere. The counselor is not required to tell us about that at all, unless certainly it's an issue of, of importance, like life-threatening, or if the officer is experiencing some psychological problems, they're required to tell us that. But other than that, those things are open to them. It's something that they can go do and not have to ever contact anybody. The bill's paid without a name.
So, Chief, I've had a conversation with Chief Papania. Today we're having a conversation with you, and we've also had some conversation with Sheriff Troy Peterson. And you all three of you guys, and you guys are the three, you and Chief Papania are the two largest departments here on the coast, I believe. And also Sheriff Troy is the sheriff of Harrison County. You guys are sure that we don't have issues like this in South Mississippi that we've seen nationally. I know from your perspective, you said the reform that you have done over the last 10 years. Also, with Chief Papania, the culture that he has created in Gulfport. What makes you all sure that here in South Mississippi, within your departments, I know you can't speak for anywhere else, in your departments, that we will not have the issues like we have in other parts of the country? Of course, you're going to always have, let me change that. Of course, you have, some people don't like the police department. Some people, don't agree with some of the, you have that. But how can you be sure that we don't garner national attention from the point of police brutality and things of that nature?
Well, first of all, I've learned in my career, and not just my career, but in life, to never say never and never say always. Those are two things that you should always have in the back of your mind. I think the only way I can answer that is to say that we've worked very hard in our hiring processes, our screening processes, and our policies to do the best that we can to make sure in a high percentage that those things don't happen. I think that the people in my department know that I'm not going to stand for somebody kneeling on somebody's neck. If that's what you have to do to get them in control, then you get them in control and you stop. It's that simple. The whole thing is to get them in control and then stop. That's what you have to do. And that in Mr. Floyd's case, that did not happen. Mr. Floyd was they had him under control, and they did not stop. I think my department knows that I'm not going to put up with that. I feel the same way about Gulfport. I feel the same way about Troy Peterson and the Sheriff's Department. I feel that way because we three have known each other for a long time. We worked dope together for a long time, and I think our although we have some differences, opinions, like everybody does, I think we're very similar in the way that we feel about things, and the way we feel about our communities, and the way we feel about life in general.
So as we sit here, I get a news alert that President Trump signed an executive order on police changes. I have no clue what that executive order is, but I want to use that as a segue to my next couple questions. So with his executive order on police changes, and we talk about police reform and police defunding, which I'm not a fan of that term, defunding. I can say that openly and personally, but I'm not a fan of defunding. I think the police department has a great mission. However, I do think that needs to be reformed and changed nationwide. What are your thoughts on reducing in funding and in the creating of funding for social services? Because a lot of the stuff that we see, Chief, a lot of the crime, a lot of the stuff that we see is done from not necessarily living a life of crime or having a family history. It's not like we got crime families down here. A lot of the crime that we see comes from not having mental illness and lack of awareness. What do you think about creating and sustaining funding for social services, which there's a lack of, but then we got, our officers have the finances there?
Absolutely. I can tell you that I'm not a fan of defunding either. Naturally, being a police chief, I don't think anybody should be defunded as far as police departments go. I think more funding is needed, certainly for mental health. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. We've all seen that. Currently, your police departments are the ones that are having to deal with the mentally ill. It shouldn't be that way. The only thing that we should deal with is just like the homeless issue. Police departments are having to deal with the homeless issue on a daily basis. It's us and nobody else that's having to deal with those issues and try to get them straight. There are some groups out there that are pushing hard, but overall, we're the ones that have to deal with those things every day, day after day. The reality of it is the police department should only be dealing with the conduct of homeless people. They should only be dealing with the initial call on the mentally ill. But as it's turned out, we've had to train our officers in critical incident training so that they will have some knowledge of how to deal with and not just on the call, but how to get a mentally ill person the help that they need. We're trained on that now, and I think that certainly, like I said earlier, there needs to be more money out there for those issues. But as far as defunding a police department, I'm going to refer to that old song, "You'll miss us when we're gone," because you will. The people don't, everything that an officer does all day long, every day, and you know this, it's a multitude of things. The police departments have been asked to deal with so many things over the years that really weren't police work. And now it's just second nature for us. We just do it. We go deal with everything you can think of, and a lot of it is civil issues that we're trying to get a resolution to, or a lot of it is people who are just need help on a particular incident, locked out of their car, or want an officer to come in and talk to their kid because they think their child's going the wrong direction. All those things, if those things disappear, you're going to see, I think all the social service in the world won't help you, because there's nothing like having a cop come into your house and sit down and tell your child how things are going to be in the future if they don't straighten out.
So you don't agree with defunding, but you do agree with nationwide reform.
Yeah, I think police departments have like us here on the coast, we have steadily reformed ourselves over the years, and these policies right here that we already do are proof of that. I'm willing to bet you that part of these policies are going to be in the president's reform bill. I bet you that they're going to be there. I don't know what else it would be. But we have steadily reformed ourselves over and over and over and remade ourselves over and over and over.
So as a police chief and a fellow police officer to other chiefs around the country, and you probably have had an opportunity to talk to several of them, what would you suggest to them when they having issues or they have issues or they have lack of, what would be your suggestion to police departments around the country that you see they having a lot of officer community infractions?
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to have a foundation. You have to build a foundation, and that foundation has to be built on ethics and morals, and then you have to have your policies in place. Your policies are your foundation. Without those policies, your department has no direction to go. Once those policies are in place, then you need to review those policies yearly. Take a look at them. Now, what we do here, and I know Gulfport does the same thing, and several of the agencies around the coast are part of have hired the Mississippi Accreditation Commission to come in every 3 years. Every 3 years, they're going to come in, and man, they're going to look all over us, and they're going to look for every antiquated policy that we have or anything that doesn't look right. They're going to look at it, and they're going to come back and say, you're not doing this properly. There's a better way to do this. And so we depend on those folks. And that's something that we
you actually have an outside agency come in?
Absolutely. We do that ourselves. That's not something that's required by law. We do that ourselves.
So you have an outside agency come in, look at your policy, overlook your entire department and say, hey, this needs to be corrected.
Absolutely.
So we have the community that's viewing here today. I think right now we have over 60 people that's on right now. And I think that's good because it was a question that was asked: how can the community be sure that South Mississippi is doing this? And so you say every 3 years this accreditation team comes in and polices the police department.
That we pay them to come in and look.
You pay them and come in and police the police department. to make sure that the guidelines that you're going by, the policies that you're going by, is being followed and followed through, or are outdated.
That's right. The way we conduct business is what they look at.
Okay. So the way that you guys conduct business. So would this be a suggestion that you suggest to other police agents?
Absolutely. I think every agency in Mississippi needs to be accredited, and a large number of them are. We've learned over the years that this is the way to do things. This is the way to do it. And when the community says, why did you do that? Well, here's the reason we did it. This is the standard. This is the high standard that we've set for ourselves. And here's a group of people that are looking over our shoulder to make sure that we're sticking to that standard.
So you do have somebody that's policing the police.
Policing the police.
I like that
yeah.
term, policing
yeah.
the police. So we're running out of time, Chief, but I do want to get in these questions because over the last several years, we've seen an increase in gun violence among our youth here on the coast. What can we do as a community to assist the police department with this?
Well, first there's a culture, and let me say that culture is not just in the black community. That culture is widespread. That you don't call the police. I can't tell you the number of times someone they'll call us and say, well, I saw this a couple of days ago, but I didn't call anybody. I didn't do anything about it. Man, if you see something, you need to say something. If you see a young person that's not acting correctly, say something. We need to know about that. If you've got guns in your house, keep them locked up, because a lot of times that is just a large portion of the weapons that hit the street here are stolen. They're stolen in burglaries. I have had people that leave their gun in their car. They don't even lock their car, and they'll leave their gun in their car. Easiest thing in the world for some kid that's just out looking for a good time, open that car door and pull that gun out from under the seat, and that is a gun on the street. Maybe a good kid. He did something he shouldn't have done, or she did something she shouldn't have done, but that doesn't mean they're a bad kid. But it's the responsibility of adult people with weapons to keep those guns secured and locked up, and don't allow them to get on the street to begin with.
Okay. So are there any programs that the police department have where they can mentor young juveniles? And when I say juveniles, I don't necessarily mean criminals, just young people in general. Where they can mentor young people within the community. Are there any programs that you guys have?
We do. We have the cadet program. And, we preach this and preach this and preach this year after year after year. And we'll pick up 2 or 3 cadets here and there, but that's it. So in order to be a cadet with Biloxi, you kind of have to be, you cannot have been in trouble already. This is a young person that we're going to bring in, and we're going to show you what the police do. We're going to show you how to become involved in your community. And this goes on year round. This isn't like a start and a stop program, but beginning and an end. Some of these kids stay in this program till they're too old, and they get out, till they turn 18 and they get out. They do a lot of good for us. We do a lot of good for them. This past year, we took our cadets and actually sent them to England. They went over to the English Police Academy. Okay. And spent a lot of time there, and that was all. They paid for that themselves. They worked hard to pay for it. It taught them how, what earning a dollar means and how hard it is to earn a dollar. They had to earn their own money, and they did it, and we're very proud of that program. We're very proud of those young people.
So, Chief, over the last 5 years, our ministry that I serve, Praise Temple of Biloxi, has had a community empowerment festival. Every November, we do this empowerment festival. Every November, we reach out to you in your community relations department. I personally reach out to you. My wife reaches out to the community relations department. And you guys send officers over here to stay with us the whole day, not as security, but to have a table, to have some kind of display going on to where the community sees you, because we believe that a part of our vision is transforming communities is to provide that bridge between the police and the community. So you guys come over, you set up mock displays, you have your dogs out. This past year, you bought your new bikes that you have your beach cruisers out. Yeah. What can other people in the community do to assist you, or not really to assist you, to team with you, to partner with you, to inform not only their people, but the entire community on how we can partner together. Now we do it. You know, we've
Yeah.
been fortunate enough to have that relationship. But what can other people across Biloxi do?
Well, I'll tell you what we have tried to do in the last couple of years, and we're working on a process now for this. We've asked our officers, we've asked the community to reach out to us if they have a board or they have some type of membership. We'd like to put an officer on that board or in your membership to be there for the meetings and to just be part of the community and to see what's going on. And that's worked pretty well for us. You know, we would like to, if there's any organization that would like to have a member. Now, we ask our officers to do this volunteer on their own time, and most of them do, you know, to sit on the board, to make decisions, to help just put our officers out in the community. That's worked pretty good, and we're still working on that. We hope that's going to be even, you know, even better in the future.
So you're asking the community leaders that have different boards and have different organizations to reach out to you all and ask you guys for an officer to be a part of it.
Yes.
And you guys will send somebody.
Well, what we'll do is we'll open it up to our department, you know, because I don't want to force you. It's no good if you're forcing somebody.
Correct.
They need to go on their own volition. So we'll open that up to the department. We'll say, you know, here's some community service work. You know, are you interested in doing this? And it helps them also because there's almost a rank. It is a rank that we're working on now, and it's a master law enforcement officer rank. And during that master law enforcement officer, in the criteria for that, there is a portion that requires that you do community service. Now, some people disagree with that. You know, you can't make me go do community service. Well, we can't make you go do it. We're not going to make you go do it. But if you want to reach this level of master law enforcement officer, then this is part of the criteria that you're going to need to meet, you know. That we've tried very hard to get that implemented. We've had some problems getting it implemented because when you write a policy like that, a rank, you put a rank in place like that, there's always difficulties that you don't realize until you try to do it, and then they pop in your face. So we'll work very hard on that, and that's not too far away from being implemented.
Chief, we're about to close this out, but I want you to do two things for me. Number one, I want you to speak to our people that are viewing today, and the Legacy Business League has a reach all across the state of Mississippi, and I want you to say something to our people today, not to appease them. That's not what I'm saying. I know your heart, so the truth, to let them know that the police department along the Gulf Coast, along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, particularly Biloxi, are doing everything that you need to do in order to make sure that the things that are happening around the country does not happen right here.
Well,
that's the first thing.
Sure. You know, I would ask early on that if there is a problem, that you let us know about that problem. Give us an opportunity to try to correct it or fix it. I assure you that what you've heard today from me is the absolute truth. We've worked very hard with our community, and I'm proud of that, and I think we have a great relationship with our community, regardless of race or anything else. We have a great relationship. We had the community pour out for us with the tragedy that we had last year. I have not forgotten that, and that was a across the board community poured out and grieved with us with the death of our officer, Robert McKeithen. And that showed me then just how much our community believes in us and how much they're behind us. But I know that there's going to be issues. There will always be some issues that have to be dealt with. But I would appreciate the fact that you would give us an opportunity to deal with that before jumping the gun and doing some of the things that you see in other communities. We want you to come to us. We want that opportunity to try to correct if there's a wrong.
Chief, and the community, before I ask you to do the next thing, I do sit on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of the Gulf Coast, and I like some of the things that you said, and I do ask that our viewers, if you live on the Gulf Coast, get your children involved in the Boys and Girls of the Gulf Coast. But I would love to talk to you about having your officers be a part of that, because that is the age group that is growing, and then some of them are seeing things, different things happen. so we could talk about that in the future.
Absolutely.
And get your department a part of the board, especially right here in
Absolutely.
East Biloxi.
Yep.
We have one club right down
Sure.
the street from you. Second thing I would ask you to do is, I don't know who's viewing. I don't. But what would you say, or say something to other departments out there and other people out there that support departments, and encourage them to do some of the same things that you guys have done in here in Biloxi? I don't believe budget should be a factor in for reform and community development and things like that. I think that has to be a part of the budget line. What, please encourage other departments and chiefs and those that support the police to 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 do some kind of reform to help create a playing field that's first of all that's safe for the officer, but also create community relations, because you guys have done a good job at that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and absolutely, I think the one thing that I could offer is the school of hard knocks that I've been to, and the policies that we put in place. If there's anything that we can do, if you have any inklings that maybe what you're doing isn't correct, call me. I'll send you a policy. I have no qualms in sharing our policies and our philosophies with anybody else, because the good Lord knows I have called many people in my career and asked for assistance, and there's no reason to stress over not understanding how something should be done. There's no, unless you've lived it, sometimes you don't understand it. So I would offer that anyone, that any agency that would like help or wants a better understanding of things, call me, and if I can do it, I will certainly do it.
Good. Well, I want to thank Chief Miller for joining us today. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank the Legacy Business League for the opportunity to facilitate this Legacy Talk series, Healing with the Black and Blue. There's a lot of different other things that Legacy has been doing behind the scenes to present networking opportunities and to move this needle forward, this conversation forward in social justice and systematic racism, because we don't want to stay the same. We don't want to stay the same. So please follow Legacy Business League on Facebook. That's Legacy Business League on Facebook to see the latest and greatest of what's going on. And please keep our nation in prayer as we move towards healing, racial conciliation, and making this place a better place, not for some men, but all men. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.